Hey guys, what's going on? I wanted to share a quick video with you. I don't know how quick it'll be because I'm making it up as I go, but I want to take an opportunity to fill out this YouTube channel with a little bit of content that I hope you'll find quite valuable. And I figured what better place to start than in the beginning. So what we're going to talk tonight about is looking for storage deals, and this is not by any stretch of polished presentation, as you'll quickly find out. So I'm hoping you'll bear with me. But again, I think you'll find some good content in here. This is me just kind of stream of consciousness going through some of the mental processes out loud that I go through when I'm looking for my next storage deal. So, generally speaking, I'm going to start with listed properties. I also do direct mail marketing that has sellers or owners who may be sellers calling me to discuss their properties. And I've got relationships with brokers that I've developed over the years where they'll bring me properties that they know fit my criteria and that sort of thing. So listings are just one place to look, but they're a good place to start, especially if you're just getting into storage, because they allow you to really dig in and practice, for lack of a better word. So here I've got pulled up in my email just some notes that I'm going to run through today. And basically, when I'm looking at deals, there's, you can see here, a 6-step process that I go through. And I'm going to walk you through that pretty quickly here. But what we do is we're going to start on the listings, and LoopNet is a great place to find properties. I started here just in the state of Ohio because I know someone who lives in Ohio, and generally speaking, I don't just randomly shop for storage throughout the country. I try to do it in a strategic way so that if and when I find a deal, it's as least disruptive to my life as possible, right? That's the reason I want to buy these storage facilities, so that I can live the life I want. I don't want to end up becoming a slave to some property that I own in the middle of nowhere in a place that I'm only going there because there's a property. That being said, I do understand the value of going where the deals are, but there's plenty of deals out there, and I think it makes sense to strategically pick and choose where you're going to go. So, for example, first you start close to home. The reason being it's cheapest to learn that way. As you do the analysis of these properties, you're going to do a lot of it initially on your computer, but then you get to a point where you need to visit the property to take your education and your exploration of storage to the next level. It's a whole lot cheaper to do that if it's, an hour's drive from home or less than if you have to fly halfway across the country. So you start close to home and you farm all those deals, and if you find one, that's great. If not, that's okay too. We're going to expand our search first by looking in areas where we frequent. For example, my family and I now own a storage facility an hour and change, hour and a half, just about from Disney World. The reason being, I have 2 young kids, and we're in Disney World 2 or 3, sometimes 4 times a year. So if I'm already going to be there 4 times a year, it makes sense that I would own a storage facility nearby there. It's also on the East Coast, which is where I am. I don't do well with jet lag, so I tend to stay within a time zone or two of home. The property we have under contract to buy right now is in North Carolina. It's a quick nonstop flight. I can go down in the morning and either back in the evening, late in the evening, or first thing the next morning. So I'm only gone for a day. Whereas if I tried that with a property on the West Coast, me being in New York, that's 3 hours of jet lag plus a 5-hour flight in each way, and it could easily eat up 2-3 days of my life, and then I'd be feeling the after effects for a day or two after, because I'm a pansy and I can't handle jet lag. So I tell you that so as you're putting together your strategy looking for storage, you're identifying places that you go frequently, maybe your in-laws or your brother or your best friend lives in a state elsewhere that you end up going there 3, 4, 5, 6 times a year. You're going there anyways, so why not kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone? And then secondly, even if your brother or your best friend has no interest in helping you with emergency boots on the ground type of things, if push came to shove, they probably would, right? But secondly, they know people and they can vouch for people, and it's a lot easier for you to extract the help you need as far as having service providers, contractors, boots on the ground to help you physically at that location if you can vet them through someone who lives within that network. So That's that. I'll move from my soapbox, and we're going to pick a facility here. Like I said, in Ohio, because I've got my mentor and uncle lives there, and so I always find myself looking. And here's a property. I have no idea what kind of. I just looked at it for about 2 minutes before I popped the camera on, and I saw that it had a couple things that would make it a good example to use. I have no idea if it's an actual deal or not, but it will serve as a good example. One of the things I do when I look at these properties is I'm just going to scroll the listing and look certainly at the pictures, just like you always would. And I love to see this here. That's messy and sloppy. They weren't even willing to clean up before pictures to sell what's a property that's listed at almost $500,000. So that just gives you maybe not an indication of how actively they are taking care of this property. You can see the for sale sign is a little leaves a little bit to be desired. So these are the mom and pop type of properties that I look at. Building size 12,800 square feet. It's on the small side, but if there's room to expand, that's not too small by any stretch. And again, the rent you get per square foot is going to vary by market. So $8,000 to $10,000 range for a first facility is decent. One of the other things I look at is price per square foot. Now, just very roughly here, you're looking at about $42 a square foot. And in my head, I'm always going to compare that to the cost to build. I know I could build a facility and it would look darn close to just like this with a fence and looks like an electronic gate operator and a small office for about $30 to $35 a square foot plus the cost of land. So what that means in this instance is, again, I don't know what the value of land is in this area, but it stands to reason that if I built this place for 350 grand and it's 8 acres, maybe that's $10 to $15 an acre land there. So this is priced about the same of new construction, which doesn't lead me to any massive conclusions. It just tells me, okay, we're in the realm. It's got the fact that it's existing and assuming that it has a revenue stream means that it has some advantages over new construction. So it's not that you wouldn't say, hey, I could build for that. Why would I buy something used when I could get a brand new one for that? Because building is a long process with lots of headaches, and it's very empty when you build it. And so there are hidden costs there. So if you can buy at or below new build cost, it's a good starting place. And that's what the first thing I saw on this property that made me want to dive in deeper. It doesn't give a whole bunch of information on the listing itself, but there was one attachment that I found here. And here it's a breakdown of the units. I'm looking at 79 interior units, which I think just means traditional drive-up access units. And then outdoor spaces are parking spots for campers, RVs. It's about 20 years old. It says it's in good condition. There's a survey we can look at there. I guess I had mentioned before 8 acres. They're looking to split off a couple of those acres and sell 5 of them. Either way, it means there's room for expansion, which is also one of the things I look for. The other information here, they've given us some tax information, the property overview. Here are the number of units. And sometimes you won't get all this, so you're having to dig a little more. But do bear in mind that these are projections and may or may not be what's actually happening. So we're going to verify all of this. But bottom line is they've given us a potential income number of $8,500 a month. And then they did the math here for us. Multiply that 8,500 times 12, you get this number of 95 grand plus some billboard income. So just back of the napkin, 10-minute analysis of this property to see if it's worth calling the broker and getting more information. We're going to start with a gross income of 100 grand. And then right off the top, what I like to do is I want to figure out the potential value of this property. So if it were operating at industry standards, what would it be worth? And they've done most of this work for us. So I'm just going to kind of piggyback off what they said. And I'm not attesting to whether or not these expenses for this property are within line, but I can tell you for $100,000 gross revenue potential, the operating expenses are sitting right at 33% of that, which is dead middle in the industry standard. So that tells me this broker probably has some experience in this realm. If all of this information, these expenses weren't given, I would have done the same thing, taken 100 grand and just ripped off a third of it, or 33,000, and said, okay, we're going to have a net operating income, which is income minus operating expenses, not counting debt service, of $63,000. So then when we have this 63 grand left over, again, projected, we're going to use that to pay any debt that we've used to purchase the property, and whatever's left after that debt service would be our cash flow or our profits. So this gives me, switching back over to my email here, whoops, how's that? This is what we were just talking about. Our projected stabilized value. This is the down and dirty gross revenue of 100 grand times 0.65 or 66, roughly a third off the gross revenue. That's going to get us a NOI of 63 grand that we talked about. Then, generally speaking, a storage facility, when it's run well, of this caliber, so I'm talking about a C-level property in a secondary or tertiary market, are going to sell in the cap rate range of 8 to 12. And so that means the property is worth somewhere between 12.5 to 8 times the net operating income. So we would take that 63 grand and multiply it by 8 to get the low range of value, not knowing anything about the market, or we would multiply it by 12 to get the high range. I use 10 as an average. Again, it's a very generic back of the napkin. This is only meant to be the 10-minute down and dirty. All right, is this thing worth getting smart on? Because I don't want to get smart on Perrysburg, Ohio, and Sandusky, Ohio, and Topeka, Kansas, and every other town in the country, unless I know that the properties are going to first pass my 10-minute test. Then I put them through a 1-hour test, and then I put them through a 1-day test. And that's how I make sure I'm not wasting time looking at properties that don't kind of stack up to each one of those levels of scrutiny. So anyways, that was number 2 that I covered for you first. That's the projected value. Now, the other thing we want to get, and I'm not going to be able to get that right now because I'm not going to call the broker live on the phone, but we would want to get a hold of some current income and expense information. Clearly, if this property is operating near its full potential, we just determined it's worth either at or above their asking price. Now, something tells me it's probably not operating at full potential. It might be 60, 70% full, and therefore, when we do this same formula, instead of using gross revenue, we're going to use actual revenue and actual expenses, and we're going to get an actual NOI, and that may show us that the value as is from an income standpoint is only 300 grand, and they're asking 475. So there's a big gap to bridge there, and it may or may not be bridgeable, but you don't know unless you ask. So that's what I want to find out, the current value and then the projected stabilized value. And very roughly speaking, I want to see the projected stabilized value be double, if not more, than the current value. And the reason is I don't want to work for piddly margins, and this is a very down and dirty calculation. So by being aggressive with it and making sure that I'm looking at properties with lots of potential, when we sharpen our pencil and really get down to it and figure out maybe the seller exaggerated here, or maybe expenses were missed there, and we can only take it from a $400,000 to a $700,000, sure, I didn't double my money, but I made 300 grand, so it would still be a great deal. So at this early phase, that's kind of my mentality. I've also got a couple spreadsheets. I don't know that I'm going to be able to attach them here, but it's something that I share with my students that help us run these a little more specifically. They basically do the same thing we just talked about, just pulling out and let me see, maybe I can show you an example. Yeah, just pulling out the expense lines here. And then this one's a little fancier. You can put in current occupancy, target occupancy, how many units we're going to add per month, and then it will do your projections over 4 years, provide you with the cash flow over those 4 years, and then the value as well as equity realized if you were to sell. So these are the types of things that the tools that you can create or get your hands on otherwise to help make this math easier. But for now, the down and dirty is the way to go. We talked a little bit about price per square foot. I already looked at that. I get really excited anytime I see something at 20 bucks a square foot or less. But I'm looking at anything up to 40 or so. I'm not usually the ones that are 50, 60, or you'll even see them for $100 a square foot. Not that they can't be deals. If they're in the right market, they very well may be. If they get exorbitant rents, or they're climate controlled, or any other number of factors can make paying considerably more per square foot appropriate. My thing is, I work in secondary, tertiary, B and C class properties that top out in value at the maybe $60 per square foot mark. So I don't want to buy at 50 or 60 a square foot. Otherwise, I've got no room to build equity. So that being said, the other thing we touched on also is the overall condition. This is just very generic at this point. I just want to get a sense, either from the broker, from the pictures, a combination of both, of what kind of improvements might be needed. And based on all of that, if I think, as I mentioned before, that I can double the value of the property, I'm going to, and I want to again emphasize, this is a very preliminary approach. We haven't spent long to do this, so we're not drawing any big conclusions. But if I think I can, what I want to look at is, okay, why is the property underperforming? Why is there so much untapped potential here? And then, of course, figure out, can I fix whatever that problem is? So clearly, we're going to move over to looking at supply and demand. And that's something that I have shown on my Facebook page before. So you can go there to find this video. Maybe I'll also copy and paste this and put it into the link of this YouTube video, so you can pop over there. I won't recreate the wheel. Essentially, I'm just going to look to calculate the supply and demand in the market. And if this facility is half full, and that's why it's got the potential to double in value if I were to fill it up, that's great. But if the market is way oversaturated and that's the reason the property is not full, then I might have a real hard time getting it filled up. If, on the other hand, the market is a little undersaturated and I can't discover any other fatal flaws through the due diligence that's going to follow in the days and weeks to come, then it may just be a neglectful manager. And that's something I can certainly fix. And so that's going to tell me, hey, this is a deal that we need to look closer at. And so I've got, like I said, that video over on Facebook where it shows you how we look at supply and demand. And I use this website link right here, which is a census website that allows me to get the population within a 3-minute radius. A 3-mile radius, 3, 4, 5-mile radius of the property, depending. And the way I decide on that is, the more rural the area, the larger radius I'm going to use, a 5, even sometimes up to 7-mile radius. In a more suburban area, I'm going to use the 3, 4-mile radius. And then areas that I don't tend to work in, but cities and highly densely populated areas, are going to have radiuses of 1 and 2 miles, because that's as far as customers are going to go to get their storage needs met. The other thing I'll do is get a very rough idea of the competition in the area. I want to see who else is out there. One, I want to compare their rates to the rates of the subject property, see if there's room to move there. I'm going to check their websites. Sometimes I'm going to have to call to get those rates. And then I'll also check out, one of the big places I check out is sparefoot.com, which is an aggregator site. It's like the Priceline of self-storage. except instead of getting hotel rooms and flights, you're getting a storage unit. And I just like to know in the market, hey, is everybody else on this website and we're all competing for those leads, or is it a relatively unsophisticated market where they don't necessarily know about the website, and I can use that as an advantage to me to ramp up my occupancy. So that whole process, the first phase of it will take about 10 minutes. And if I don't discover anything during that first phase, I just keep looking and usually can get through all 6 of these steps and have a really good idea, including a call to the broker, between 30 and 90 minutes. And that will give me a great idea of, hey, yeah, there's potential here. And then I'll move on to spend more time. Sorry, I brain fart there. As I've come to that determination, a lot of it is going to be, for example, in my head, I'll have an idea. All right, this property we were just looking at, listed at 475. I do the math, and I'm making all this up, but let's say I do the math and I see, well, based on its current income, it's only worth 200 grand. Well, it's not likely that they're going to accept 200 grand, and I'm not going to present that as an offer to a broker at this stage of the game, right? He'll think I'm nuts and I won't get very far. I want to help him do his job, and his job is to get as most for his client as possible, as quickly as possible. I don't want to pay any more than I need to for the property, but at the same time, I am cognizant of the fact that on underperforming properties, the cap rates using a multiple of NOI falls apart. Most of the properties I buy, if I bought them at based on a 10 cap, which is a generic average you'll hear thrown around, I would be paying 100 grand for a property, and ultimately I'm paying 330 for it. So I am paying for income that isn't there. But the reason I am is because I'm also using price per square foot. I'm using the potential of the property to justify somewhat of a higher cost if it makes sense to do so. So that's just a disclaimer. Don't get stuck on, oh, I'm only paying 10 times NOI. If this property's income-based valuation is 200 grand, but I've done the math, and if it's fully operational, it could be worth, let's say, 650, 690, 700,000, then sure, I may offer the seller an additional 100 grand that he doesn't deserve based on the performance of a property, simply because he has an asset and I know how to unlock the potential. Again, the extra acre of land or acreage of land has value. So these are all things you take into consideration. But again, I don't know how valuable that was. I'm hoping that you found my mental tangent somewhat valuable and you were able to follow along with them. This is a property that I would call on. This makes sense to me, at least from a talking to the broker standpoint. And to give you an idea of how that call would go, I would just call up and say, hey, what can you tell me about the property? I saw the listing. I would try to get current income and expenses, try to get motivation of why the seller wants out, how long has it been listed, how active has the interest been. I would probably point out that, if it came back that the property wasn't performing, up near potential, and maybe the valuation is lower, I would point out that I can't offer 475. Is the seller flexible at all? And the way I do that is I tell the broker, listen, I want to be respectful of your time. I'm relatively experienced in this niche, and bluntly, I can't offer full asking price. There's got to be enough room for me to make some money, and on this one, it's just not there. That said, if there's sellers willing to entertain offers, I'd be happy to put one out there, and I will sharpen my pencil to get it as high as possible to maximize the chances that we can come together on terms. But it's not going to be 475. So you let me know, is it worth going through the paces on this one, or should I keep looking? Right? That's what I'm doing, is asking the broker or the seller, if I'm speaking to them directly, I'm asking for permission to offer them less. Sometimes I'm asking for permission, depending on the property, to lowball them. I'm also going to try to find out about seller financing, see um, what options are there, if any. And I just present that as saying, I know some people love the idea of delaying or deferring taxes and not paying Uncle Sam a big chunk of change all at once. Other people really just want to collect their lump sum and will do the pay the government what their fair share due is. Um, is your seller open to carrying financing and deferring any taxes? See what they say. And I'll also say, I'll follow up my conversation about, hey, can I lowball you? With one of the ways that I can offer more is if the seller or yourself are willing to uh, carry any paper, and then just let them respond. Um, I think that's about it. The other thing that I ask is about condition and deferred maintenance and those types of things. And based on that conversation, if I have a good feel, I'll oftentimes leave the power in the hands of the broker and say, okay, well, it sounds like there's some potential here. I'd like to do a little more math and see how high I can get my number. But what do you think's best? Should we go straight to an offer, or do you want to talk verbally with your seller? Or I can do a letter of intent, any of these things. And um, I let I'm cognizant of the fact that the easier I make the broker's job, the better chances I have to make a deal come to fruition. And so, if the broker wants a contract, I'm not going to insist on an LOI unless I have a very good reason to, or vice versa. If they want an LOI, I'm not going to insist on a full blown 20-page contract again unless I have a good reason to. When you operate from a mentality of helping other people succeed as easily as possible, right? You're more likely to succeed yourself. And so I take that kind of thought process into every interaction that I have with people, whether it's brokers, attorneys, accountants, etc. You make their job easy, and they will love working with you and deliver you the kind of service that helps you succeed. So that's my little soapbox. Hopefully, I didn't get too crazy on a tangent here. I've had too much caffeine this evening, and so rambling maybe just a little bit, but I hope you found some value in that, and I'd welcome any comments, questions below, and I will be sure to respond to those. Till next time, guys, I will see you later.